listening to The Tenderness Revolution, a podcast about the stories of kindness, compassion, and empathy that play out in our lives, because these deeply moving experiences describe what it means to be human and invite us into a new way of thinking about the world and each other. I'm your host, writer and journalist Yvonne Gavin. And every episode, I'll be asking a new interviewee about a pivotal moment of tenderness that helped shape the course of their life. Today's conversation is with the illustrator and animation director, Gary Andrews, whose approach to life, quite frankly, embodies true compassion. Because Gary suffered a devastating loss around 4.5 years ago, the kind of loss that changes everything. Yet the way he's navigated his grief, by doing a sketch of something that's happened that day, something one of his 2 children have said, or something that he struggled with, or that's made him laugh, although he talks so beautifully in this interview about the guilt he's felt around finding pockets of humour and laughter along his grief journey and how he dealt with that. And then he's sharing these very relatable drawings every single day on social media in what he's called a doodle diary, building up tens of thousands of followers along the way. And the way he's done this has been remarkable because his honesty and openness and willingness to share the pain and the darkness and the struggles and the beauty and just how profound it all is. It's had a huge impact on so many people. It's helped so many through their own grief and their own struggles. And in doing so, it's helped Gary enormously too. And this is the circle of compassion. And it takes courage. So this is Gary Andrews, also known as Gary Scribbler, who you may have come across in the various interviews he's done in newspapers, magazines, and on the radio over the past few years. He's an amazing illustrator, so look him up. He's worked in children's TV, he directed Fireman Sam, and now he's working on Horrid Henry. But really, he's just a remarkable person. So keep listening to hear about his sad, deeply moving personal story that really is very inspiring, but one that has a happy ending. And I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hi, Gary. It's lovely to see you.
Hello, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
So thank you for coming on the Tenderness Revolution podcast.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, well, it's great. And it's great that we get this chance to chat because there's just so much I'm really excited about talking about with you. But I wanted to start off, as I always do, by asking you to share your moment of tenderness with us. So the idea behind the Tenderness Revolution podcast is that essentially our lives are made up of all these little stories stitched together. And when we shine a light on scenes where we felt a profound sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, moments where we felt seen or understood, or that we had a deeper relationship to the world around us, it's as though we're awakened to a greater sense of meaning and purpose. So Gary, please do share your moment with us.
Well, it's interesting because it's been an incredible journey since Joy died, of growth and development, but there hasn't been one major road to Damascus moment. There have been a series of little small incidents which are built into a bigger change, and I'm just sort of going through in my mind some of the moments that there have been, and I remember one of the first ones that really struck me was after Joy died. I mean, we'd lived our lives fairly secular, but we used to call ourselves secular pagans. We sort of, our spirituality was very much rooted in nature and following the wheel of the year and the circle of life and all that kind of thing. And after she died, that side of thing became really strong and powerful for me. And we didn't have a funeral. We had a passing ceremony in the woods where we had a circle of about 200 people in the woods, and we had a ceremony where we kind of brought her spirit in, for want of a better expression, said things about her and then let her go, and we released her from our lives. And as we said that, it was November, it was quite chilly, and as we said that, there was a gust of wind and all the trees moved and a beam of light came down and hit the spot where we had some of her things and it was literally this unbelievable, there was a gasp went around the circle, and that was quite an incredible moment because it made me realize just how much that kind of spirituality meant to me. That was a big moment, and that helped me on how I saw where she'd gone, what the death meant. And my children saying to me, what happens after you die, and nobody really knows, and Christians think this and Buddhists think this and blah 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 blah, and I said, what I feel is that we come from stardust, we go to stardust, and when we die our energy just goes out there and you're everywhere. And if you need mummy, she's that leaf, she's that breeze, she's that sunbeam, she's whatever you want her to be. And as I was saying it to them, I realized that that's kind of how I felt as well. So that was quite a moment, I guess, which made me more at peace with the concept of the fact that she'd gone, because although she'd gone, she was everywhere. And then there were other little things that went all the way along, like moments of connection with the wider community, where I was doing these drawings and people would comment, and then I would share sepsis awareness things, and people would message me saying, if you hadn't shared the signs of sepsis, we wouldn't have realized that there's something wrong, and my dad wouldn't have got into hospital and he'd be dead now. And I've lost count of the amount of messages like that I've had, which made me realize the strength of the connection through originally these drawings that got people's attention, and then that message. It was a two-way process. It wasn't just me sitting there putting pictures out. It was a dialogue with a wider community, and that was quite a sort of realization as well. I think things like that have been steps throughout the journey.
Gosh, both of those are incredible. I mean, firstly, the connection that you have experienced through sharing your illustrations, it's really, really profound that you were able to express what you were feeling and sort of process it and then articulate it and then have this reaction and this response.
It's been extraordinary. Yeah, I mean, I've had things like on top of the sort of sepsis awareness side of things, just the sort of emotional side of the drawings. I remember quite early on, well, no, about a year in, I suppose, or 6 months in, I was doing a drawing about the feelings and about the grief demon and stuff like that, and a lady wrote to me and said, my husband lost his mother or father or something about a year ago, and he's not been able to process it, and I showed him your drawings and suddenly it all came out, because he went, that's it, that's what I've been trying to say. And when you hear things like that, you go, wow, okay, I'm very lucky that I can help somebody else realize what they couldn't articulate, and they can point at it to their friends, their family, and say, this is what I'm talking about. So that's, yeah, I've been incredibly privileged that I've had that ability to do that, but it's also helps me, of course. Every time I hear a story like that, it's kind of healing for me, and it makes Joy's death less pointless, that the fact that we can help people through that, and so I say we still, don't I, we help people. Me and her.
Please tell us about your journey with grief, going right back to your relationship with Joy. You got together, was it around about 1998, and then married in 2004?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We met at a local theatre. We met through a love of theatre and drama and Shakespeare. And I was about 15 years older than her. So it was I felt I was very lucky. And she was tall and beautiful and kind and funny and talented and all that stuff. And we just had this connection. We literally, there was one of those days when we'd known each other for a little while as friends. And one day we were sitting and chatting, and we turned to say something. We both at the same moment went quiet. And so, did you just feel it? And we had this weird rushing sensation, and realized we'd literally fallen in love at the same moment, which was weird and bizarre, but rather cool. And anyway, yeah, and we had 19 years together, and 2 lovely kids, and loads of shows and films and all things we used to do and make together. And we were like this symbiotic relationship. Sort of one person, Gary and Joy was like one word, And then, yeah, in October 2017, I went to Canada on business, and she got what appeared to be something a bit fluey for a couple of days. And then I got a call saying, can you come home? Because she's had to go into hospital. So if you can get a plane home, that would be very good, because it doesn't look, too clever. And by the time I landed, she was dead. And it turned out to be sepsis. And, suddenly overnight, everything turned around 180 degrees. And I found myself in my late 50s with 2 young children as a solo parent and a widower. And it was the strange, surreal experience that, obviously it's like, being whacked in the face with a frying pan. You just suddenly stood there going, what just happened? It was pretty huge, but
something you could never prepare for.
The thing is, because of our ages and because of life, you're kind of planning for the other way around. The law of averages said I was definitely the one that was going to go first. Luckily we'd covered both eventualities in the practical terms, but never really thinking it would come to that, so but yeah, it was one of those huge things where you go, okay, so that just happened, so what do I do now? I'd lost both my parents when I was fairly young. By the time I was in a 3-year period between sort of from my late 20s to my early 30s, I lost both my mum and dad, and I had no siblings, so I was used to death of a close relationship.
Oh goodness! Wow, that's a lot of grief and loss.
Yeah, I was 28 when I think my dad died, and just 31 when mum died, I think. So, and they were in their late 60s. They were young. They were too young. But despite that, it was still the right way round. You expect to lose a parent. I expected to have them for longer, but they went, and the grief was there, and you cope with the grief in the way that you cope with the grief at that point. And so what it meant when Joy died was that the practical side of grief I'd had experience with. Yeah. And sometimes if it's your first bereavement, obviously the whole thing can be so overwhelming. So in a way I was lucky, if you want to look at it that way, that I kind of had that aspect of it kind of wrapped up. I knew the hoops that you needed to jump through, which meant it gave me more time in a way to process the emotions. Right. And of course, the emotions you're feeling when you lose a partner, someone you've chosen to be with you, are different to losing a parent, to losing a child, to losing whatever. They're different for each kind of relationship. Yeah. And everybody's experience of that is going to be individual to them as well. Yeah. But there was that, incredible sense of this isn't fair. She shouldn't have gone. And being angry at fate for having it that way round, and mostly and very quickly I got angry for her, not for me, because at the end of the day I was still there. Yeah, I knew I was still there, and I couldn't get myself into the poor me why have I been left alone thing, because I had these 2 lovely children and I had 19 years of absolutely brilliant memories, which is more than so many people have, and I very quickly became aware of that. So a lot of my anger at her death was anger at what she wasn't getting to experience. Right. And it's still the thing that I think I find most upsetting now. And I'm very much at peace with the fact that she's gone, because, at the end of the day, because of my spiritual belief and this whole cyclic thing, that is nature. It's, it's a roll of the dice. And yes, she lost the roll, which is, awful, but it's natural. But the bit that I find unfair is what she's not seeing our children turning into these lovely young adults, seeing our daughter becoming this incredible woman, being the friend that I always knew they were going to be together, and all that kind of thing. That's what makes me really upset and angry these days, when I think of it on her behalf.
Right. Yeah. So as a professional animator, that's what you do. You started doing illustrations of family life and sharing them on social media as your doodle diary. Is it around about your 54th birthday?
Yeah, 54, 55, something like that. I forget what it was. It was about 1.5 years before she died. I was doing it just for fun. I was putting these pictures out. It was a thing. It was a thing I wanted to do, because I wanted to do a proper drawing every day rather than all the digital stuff I was doing for my job. I just wanted to do something that made me do a drawing every day.
Right.
And
Okay.
a diary made the most sense because you do it every night at the end of the day. Right, what
Mm.
happened today? And you do a little diary, something funny, something silly, something you thought of, whatever. And I just used to put them out there because I put them on there because it was somewhere to put them, to keep them. So you've got the diary, you've got the actual sketchbooks, but you've also then got a digital place where they're kept as well. So it was easy to sort of keep them all in one place, and it would entertain my friends and the handful of followers that I had, sort of thing. So that was what that was for, really. But yeah, then when she died, I kept it. By then it was a year and a half, and it had become a habit. It had become part of my process, really. So I just carried on drawing, but obviously that became the focus of my thoughts, was the grief process and the single parenting process and everything like that. And obviously that's what, certainly in the early days, that's what it was all about, the drawings. And again, I kept posting them because A, I was doing them anyway, and B, I thought, well, it will help my friends know where my head's at, because they can't all phone every day and check how I am. But if I'm posting these things, they'll know what's going on. So that's really why I kept posting them. There was no thought beyond that.
Yeah.
But then I think it was, someone in the press noticed them, and I got asked to do some interviews, and they went in the paper. And then the one show got in touch and asked me to go on there, and I did a little animated film that they asked me to do that was based around it, and all this kind of thing. And the whole thing just went crazy and snowballed. And before I knew it, there were thousands of, it was nuts, and suddenly I had this huge following that were following this grief journey, which was a little daunting at first. You go, oh, that's a bit strange. And am I exploiting something I shouldn't be, but it's like, it was never for gain or for money or everything else. And that's why I say about how very quickly, when I was getting the feedback from people, I was realizing how important other people were finding it.
Yeah.
So that's when I said, right, of course I keep doing this. Of course, for me anyway, but also for them.
It seems like, so there's like two parts of it that make it really fulfilling. There's the part where you're actually processing what you're feeling in doing these drawings. So it's almost like
self-counseling.
Yeah, it's like journaling, where you get all your feelings
Exactly.
down, but you're an illustrator. So you're making it into a drawing. And obviously you're incorporating words into it as well. And then there's the other part of it, which is the connecting part. I think it can be so easy to underestimate how important that is to us. And I think especially going through really difficult things, I think sometimes there's a tendency to not share, and almost to kind of retreat and to feel like, well, if I say this, then somebody might think that, and almost, to kind of analyze what might happen if you actually honestly, communicate.
Exactly that. And I think the thing I would notice quite quickly was when people would respond, they were responding to the everyday, the mundane, the honesty, the universality of what was going on in it. And people saying, oh, I'm glad I saw this because I was feeling that and I thought I was alone in this feeling, and you're saying it as well, and I realize I'm not alone, and stuff like that. And you go, okay, this is actually quite powerful. Which made it very clear to me that it was a responsibility of mine to just be completely truthful in the drawings all the time, and to not make anything up, not play to the crowd, not draw what I think people might want them to see, but just be completely truthful to what my feelings are that day. And if I think, God, this is a boring one, and I'm drawing it thinking, well, no one's going to care about this, but it would. And that's the thing that was kind of, eye-opening in a way, and I think has proved the most useful to people is keeping it real, keeping it honest, keeping it simple and mundane.
It was the honesty that made it successful, I think, is what really people were responding to, because I think you can tell, like, I think you sniff it out very quickly if someone's being fake, and I couldn't be, because I wouldn't be true to myself if I was anyway, because the whole point of doing it for me was to let me know what I was feeling, as well. So if it's fake, that's not, that you're not being true to yourself. So what's the point? So it was it's been really fascinating. If I could step back from it and look at it from the outside, it's been fascinating. But it's an interesting it's an interesting journey, because you are essentially using the social media as almost like as a confidant. And I think social media has had such a bad reputation, and it almost as though it's this dysfunctional form of communication, and especially the fact that you're sharing with strangers, and that's often what people criticize it for. But
Yeah.
actually, I think research has shown that it's easier to be open with strangers, because when we're in relationship with people and we communicate really difficult things, they obviously have feelings towards us, and then that agenda can complicate their response, or what we're looking for from them, or also what we're willing to share, and what we can hold things back because we're kind of editing. And so did you find that it was easier to share things on social media that maybe you couldn't have actually said to close family and friends?
Well, I think just in practical terms, because you feel things at a certain point in time, in the day or whatever, and that there aren't people there sometimes to say it to, but you feel like you need to say it, and that in itself was a thing. I mean, I've never had any trouble on a one-to-one basis talking to people, as you can probably tell. But yeah, I guess sometimes you just sort of think, oh God, they're just going to think I'm being a bit self-centered if I go on about it or whatever, which of course they won't, and you're not. That's the other thing. And in fact, my friends have been extraordinary and wonderful, and I have been able to talk to them on a one-to-one basis about anything, but you can't have a queue of them there the whole time to take it in turns to listen to it. So having the social media thing there and being able to say it on there, and to be able to say it, as you say, to strangers, because the thing is, your friend circle have something in common with you. There's a commonality, so you have a shared experience. And what's interesting about doing on social media is you're getting feedback from people who you would never meet in real life. You would never meet. I mean, I've now got about 56,000 follow on Twitter, and they come from every continent, from every walk of life, from far left to far right. Every political, every religious, and there's a total mixture of people, all of whom are lovely. This is the thing that's extraordinary as well. People that if you met in real life that would have different political, social, whatever beliefs to yourself, who you would have nothing to talk to about. I have a dialogue with these people, and because what is universal is grief, is humanity, and it's there, and it opens up to that conversation. That's been incredible.
It's actually such a privilege that you're able to connect and communicate with all these people. And
it really is.
Yeah. And it speaks to that sort of sense of, like you said, grief. It's a universal human experience. All of us are going to experience it, or all of us have. And, but also what you do is you talk about the everyday, you talk about life as a single dad to 2 kids. And so many people, can relate to, what it is to be a parent.
Single parents for a lot of different reasons as well. And that side of things, obviously, as the initial pain of the grief sort of subsided and the single parenting kind of started taking over a bit, and it's now a bit of everything, isn't it? It's grief still crops up occasionally, but it's also about love, and it's about parenting, and it's about the banalities of life, and even those sort of things a lot of people feel alone in. And it's nice for them to know they're not alone in that, if they're struggling trying to sort of get their kids to school, or oh my God, I've got to buy them shoes again, and it's just those sort of things, which can sometimes feel like you're banging your head against a wall, and just to see somebody else out there going, yeah, that happens to me too, I think is kind of raise a smile, give you a sense of relief, anything. I just feel now I love doing it because I like sort of cataloging the strange little things of life these days, and in all its complexity.
I read that you keep all of the actual physical notebooks, and you have them sort of catalogued, and sometimes your children will flick through them, and
I'll come down into the living room sometimes, and my daughter is sitting there, going through one from about 3 years ago or something, and looking at the old drawings and stuff. Yeah, it's lovely. I'm on book 16 now. I think I'm on the 16th book. So
it's so fantastic to have a record of all those little things that
that you say to each other, your children say. And
well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because these days we all have our phones in our pockets and they've got cameras on it. We take thousands of blooming photos, but a photo takes a photo of a thing. But the thing with the drawings, which has been on top of that, is they're about a moment or an experience or a feeling, which is hard to take a photo of.
Yeah.
But you can do a drawing of it, and it gives you another side of your life to remember.
Definitely.
And that's really lovely. I mean, to be able to doing that has been a lot of fun. And
I mean, your drawings are quite remarkable. There's so much feeling in them. So, the things that I've really noticed is that there's, the expressions are really, very, very predominant. So you'll really capture a facial expression, which you don't often get in a photograph, like a moment. And then you'll have like the thought bubbles on top of that. So, you've got like, what I was thinking in this moment, and then what they were thinking, or what they were saying and what I was thinking about, what they were saying. And that there's so many layers to it. Yeah, it's really, really capturing.
I'm very lucky that that's the way my brain works, and I'm lucky I have this ability, that I was born with this ability to draw, and it's what I do, and it's what I don't have to think about. Drawing is something I'm lucky. See, I don't have to think about the drawing. That's the easy bit. It's the what am I going to draw is the bit that becomes important. And that's, to me, what's become part of the process. And when I sit down every night at the end of the day, I'm unpacking the day. It's like a mindfulness moment. You sit there and go, okay, what do I want to take away from today? And you go back through your day, and you unpack it, you pull it apart and go this step and that. And then I do the drawing, and they say the drawing is the last bit. And that's kind of, I'm lucky that I don't have to think about that. But it's the thinking about what is the thing that to me is and this is what I say. I've run workshops on this. And I've said to people, you don't have to be able to draw to keep a doodle diary. It can be stickmen, because it's the thinking process that matters. And the drawing is kind of the bit of just getting that out of you and expressing and getting it down on paper. And if you've got a negative feeling, if you had a day where you got, the black dog of depression's been there, or you've had a really bad grief day, getting that down on paper, even in a little stick man with a little scribbled cloud above its head, and going, I felt like this today. It kind of exorcises a little bit of that pain. And you can put it on the paper, and then you can do whatever process you want. I keep them because they're drawings that you can look at, or whatever. If you feel, well, these aren't really proper drawings, I can't keep them, part of your process could be the next morning, maybe you tear it up or burn it or whatever, and you're letting it go back out into the ether. Maybe that could be part of your process. So, there's so many ways you can use this kind of technique.
I love the way you describe that, and actually describe what your process is. And I think it's incredibly helpful. And I think, it is a form of self-discipline, though. And that's what I think has been the real, where it's really been a success for you, because even in the midst of, this huge tragedy that you experienced, you knew that it was a tool that was going to help bring you through it.
Gave me a way in to sit down for a moment and go, this has happened. I need a moment to process this feeling that I've had. And quite often, if you haven't got a way to process it, you take that to bed with you, it grows, it gnaws inside you, it eats away, and you get into depression, you get into pain, you get confused, whatever. This is why people go to therapy. They go and talk about stuff to get those feelings out, which is great.
Yeah.
And there's a huge place for that. This was my therapy.
Yeah.
It gave me a moment to sit and center and think, and either be grateful for a thing and put that down, or have something hurting and put that down. And as I say, by putting it down on paper, a little bit of it evaporated and went away, and you feel better. So yeah,
it's incredible. Like for me, writing, it has serves the same purpose, and I think it would be so helpful for people to know about this, and to implement it, whatever it is they're going through. Even just as a regular practice, it helps, as you said, to prevent those feelings from hiding in the body, which is
it's the worst thing. Bottling up any feelings is the worst thing of all. And I mean, when Joy was alive, if we'd ever had a day where we'd had a little bit of a disagreement or something like that, I mean, we were lucky, we didn't really argue ever. But if you had one of those days where you're like, we made sure we never went to sleep with any of that there. You'd always make sure that you'd vented it. Don't go to sleep on an argument, that whole thing. We would make sure that we'd cleared the air and we knew where we were. And you're doing that with yourself. You're clearing the air with yourself, with your own feelings. You've got a thing that's sitting on you. Let's confront that, and let's get it out, and either by by journaling, by drawing, whatever, recording, whatever you've got, baking, I don't know, whatever it is that you do to sort of express yourself, by doing that at the end of your day, means I've never had a problem sleeping since,
Wow.
Some people have terrible insomnia with grief and stuff like that, but because I've been doing this,
it's a processing. I'm
not holding on to stuff.
But apart from the actual expressing, which obviously you're a real natural at doing that, and you have an outlet for that, being able to listen is another a really important aspect of communication. And I've been thinking about how, as a single dad, you were going through your own grief journey, but then your children were going through grief. And I've been wondering about how it must have been for you to support them and listen to them, like fully show up and really deeply listen, when obviously you have your own stories. And also, as a parent, sometimes it's just so hard to see your kids in pain, and to want to jump in, and not, and you don't want them to feel that, but then, you want them to express it. It must be very complicated.
It is. And I think I tackled that head on right at the beginning, because I knew how I felt. I knew what they would feel. So I said to them, I'm not going to hide anything from you. I'm going to cry. You're going to see me upset. You're going to see me missing mummy. I will tell you when I'm feeling things. Please tell me when you are. You can say anything. You can tell me anything. I'm there 24/7, and it's a two-way process. We were in this together sort of thing. I didn't go down I'm the big, strong daddy route. I'm going to protect you from all this. I just said, this is horrible. Let's do this together, and I said they were 7 and 10 when she died. So they were young. But we did that. We sort of did it together, and they would talk to me about stuff at bedtime usually. You get the big huge life questions when they're just about to go to sleep, and you're going, oh my Lord. But it was so we approached it that way, really. I just wanted to be there to listen for them and to let them know that it's not a sign of weakness to be upset, or you don't have to hide anything. So that was kind of how I approached it with them, really. I mean, we would sit there at bedtime, and they'd ask the questions, and it would turn into quite a long, you're thinking, you're supposed to be going to sleep, but this is an important question. So the answer to the question was more important than an extra 20 minutes sleep, So
again, just the honesty and just fully, I mean, I think there's this tendency so often to want to hide things, to protect, children. And actually
our instinct as a parent is to protect them. That's what you want to do. You want to protect them from the big bad world. You want to protect them for everything. But Joy and I always had this attitude with them when they were little, that the best way they're going to learn is to get things wrong. Oh, they're climbing that thing. Well, they're climbing that thing. Other parents go, look at them up on the climbing frame. Go, yeah, but they fall off. They'll learn. They won't do it again. And so we always used to let them make their mistakes and then be ready to pick up the consequences, rather than going, no, don't do that. Instead of don't do that, you say, I wouldn't do that if I were you, but it's your choice, and then if it went wrong, you go, see, I was right, wasn't I? And that was kind of the way we did life with them anyway. So I kind of carried that over into the grief, really, of just sort of letting it be there.
I think you're very comfortable with feelings, and I think that's the thing. I think a lot of people find feelings difficult. They try to not feel them, and I think that's often in parenting. It's they don't want to feel the fear, or they don't want their children to feel difficult things, so that thing of protecting. But the truth is, life is full of ups and downs. Like, that is the truth. It's just full of it. Like the way you draw, the roller coaster is like an image that comes up for you, and that it's just, that is the truth. I think it's really helpful to teach children to be brave and teach them that is the truth, but that's okay. It's okay, because it's supposed to be like
the bravest thing you can do is to say, I need help, I'm something hurts, whatever. That the bravest thing you can do is not to sort of cover it up and be strong, but to actually go, help. It's the bravest thing you can say.
That's courage. That's the courage that we talk about On the Tenderness Revolution. And yeah, I fully agree. But in terms of your relationship with your children through this journey, I mean, so many of your illustrations, they actually depict how amazing their resilience has been, how it's really shown up. And I think there's one of your daughter Lily on the first Mother's Day after Joy's death. And it was so, I mean, I have to admit, I did have a little cry yesterday when I was, reading through, because, your drawings, they hit a nerve, because I can just really imagine, my children being in that position or being,
they're real
being
moments.
you.
I mean, that's the thing. They're not contrived things to create a response. They're things that they said and did. And I think that's what probably comes through, because they're not perfect little vignettes of whatever. They are bites of a thing that happened in a day. And and my son has always got this great way with words and stuff, and he was the one that on the we went out for lunch, and there's all stuff about Mothering Sunday, and he said we can have Daddering Sunday, stuff like that. And
I mean,
it's interesting, as they get older it's kind of harder in a way. It's been now 4.5 years since Joy died, and they're now, my daughter's 14, nearly 15, my son's coming up 12, and it's slightly harder now, because naturally at that age they are a little bit more withdrawn about their feelings. And it's slightly harder now to navigate that, and I'm having to be a little bit more patient and wait. I can't, when they were little they would just say everything. Now they hold it in a bit more, and it's kind of, it's tougher, because I want them to go, come on, there must be something, you're still, but they're the age they are, so that's typical of that age. And
I mean, I've got teenagers, and I know exactly what you're talking about, because as a parent, you have to make that shift, and you have to understand that you just have to be more patient, and you have to learn that if you hold back, they're going to come towards you. Like, the more that you say, okay, that's fine, you don't have to tell me, in doing that, then they come and tell you. But you have to learn that. Like, it's like all the different twists and turns of being a parent is you're constantly having to learn new things, aren't you? I mean,
and it blimey, and you haven't got the pair of you there to bounce ideas off, to go, so what should you do? And they might talk to one and not the other. But when it's just you on your own, you just think, you feel a bit outnumbered by life, it's like, oh my god, they're both in that phase now where they're just like, they're monosyllabically grunting or whatever, and you just think, well, they're brilliant. I mean, Lily has just recently got into Emily Dickinson, and she's now writing poetry and stuff again. It's some poems when Joy first died that were very little sort of, little girl poems, but rather beautiful. She's just started again now. I've just bought her a new journal to do them in, and she's just so heavy. Like, there's that program on Apple TV, Dickinson, which I introduced her to because I loved it, and I said, you'll enjoy this. And she watched that. She's now watched it like 3 times, and she's just become obsessed with Emily Dickinson. And I bought her the complete works, which is this gigantic book, and she's now writing her own Emily Dickinson style poems, which is rather wonderful.
Love that. With the dashes at the end of the lines.
And that's slightly surreal, but they're beautiful. I mean, they took my breath away. She read me a couple, and I'm like, crikey, this is when your children surprise you like that. I love that.
When they surprise you. And also, I'm always amazed, I'm sure this has been the case for you, at what you learn from them. I mean, what have you learned from them in this journey?
Well, I mean, I learned my first lesson from Ben a couple of days after Joy died, when he was sitting there one evening, and he was really sort of in a ball, and suddenly he just released this anger, he was so angry that it had happened, and he just thrashed and bashed on the sofa, this big leather sofa, and he just pummeled and I just said, keep going, mate, do it, and he just kept going until he was spent, and they made a big cuddle and went to bed. And a couple of days later, when they were in bed one night, I was sitting there, and I felt the anger welling up inside me that he'd been feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered that moment, and I just took it out on the sofa, and I did exactly what he did, and pummeled the thing to, till I couldn't move, and felt so much better after, and realized that was, I'd learned that from him. And then I went and bought a punch bag, so that we could have that, and to take it out to save the sofa, because it was quite expensive. So and yeah, we got the punch bag. So then if you were feeling it, you could go and just beat the living whatever out of the punch bag. But that was a big lesson that I learned from him straight away. The other lesson I learned from them as well was to laugh, that to live in the moment, to actually to still be alive, to live. Quite often when you're newly bereaved, you feel guilty when you have a good day. Because you're full of pain and grief, and then suddenly one day you find that day when you go, oh, I haven't been crying today, I've been laughing, and then you feel really bad about it. And you have a terrible evening because you suddenly had a good day. And I suddenly thought, actually, no, why? What? She wouldn't want me to feel like this. I need to live in that moment, and life and laughter, and they have to go together. And I think I learned that from them as well. So,
well, I mean, yeah, what amazing teachers children are, and they really inhabit their bodies. And I think that, what you said about, your son and how he knew what to do. I learn a lot always from my kids too.
And I think we have to be open.
You do. You have to be, and noticing, like willing to kind of be present and take that information in, sort of as it were. But you mentioned earlier about the grief that you experienced when you were much younger, and I'm really interested in this kind of capacity that you have to be so open. Do you think it came from your parents? Were they very good at being open with you?
Funny enough, not really. I mean, I was born in 1961, and at that time, they were 37 and 40, which in those days was old.
Yeah.
I mean, these days that's completely normal. I mean, God, I was older than that. Right. But they were considered older parents in those days. And they were of a generation where, 37 was like 47. Do you know what I mean? They loved me deeply. They both came from very poor backgrounds, so they thought the best thing for me to show love was to send me to boarding school, which was done not to get rid of me, but to give me the best in their idea of what they didn't have, from having very poor backgrounds. Okay. So there was actually a little bit of weird distance, I think, not in a bad way. It was just that we didn't have the closeness that I have with my children that I think we try and achieve these days. They did it out of good intentions, and but it was quite hard. Certainly growing up, I didn't have that. And then as Dad got ill, and he took like 2 years to die, and over that 2 years I think I got closer to him than I had done through my whole life. And then I was left looking after Mum for 2.5, 3 years, whatever it was, before she died. And I got closer to her at that point. But I think and then I had children late. But I think what it meant, what I remember, certainly, I think the openness I have probably has come since I've had children. I think it's two things. One is I'm interested in drama and theatre and stuff like that, and that's about dealing with emotions and openness. So being a bit of an arty type in that way, I guess. Feelings are something I'll bang on about anyway. But also, when I had children of my own, the thing I didn't want was the distance.
Right. Having had that.
And as I keep saying, it wasn't a bad distance between my parents. It was just it was all done out of the best intentions for them, and I loved them dearly, and they were the sweetest, loveliest people. And my dad was my hero. But I wanted to be close to them. I wanted to be open, to never hide anything, to be able for them to talk to me. There were certain things, if I was feeling, when I was younger, I couldn't talk to my parents about that. I wouldn't know how to talk to them. I didn't know if they'd understand what they feel. Mine can talk to me about anything.
So you made like a conscious sort of decision to keep that channel open. Because you were aware of it. So and I guess that works both ways. I made that decision because I've got that capacity to talk about emotion, and also by making that decision, it opened me to talk about emotion. So it kind of self-fulfilled itself, if you see what I mean. With regards to, I mean, the past couple of years have been weird, haven't they, with the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns? I mean, how how you navigated that, I can only imagine. And it wasn't that long after Joy's death. There must have been particular challenges that came up for you.
Yeah, there were, I guess. I mean, look for the negative first. I mean, I looked around sometimes, some other friends and families that were locked in together, and seeing that there was the two of them, the couple with their children, thinking, oh well, you've got, that must be kind of nice, you got that time to, blah blah.
Yeah.
And it was just me and them.
Yeah.
So you think, wow. Flip side of that is, of course, we really became very close in that time. And because I had a bit more time, I was lucky. Work carried on for me because I worked from home, and I continued working through, although it wasn't the sort of pressure of work. The hobby side of life, the things we were doing in the evenings, all went away. So I had a lot more time.
Yeah.
What we did is we used that time together. We did a lot of, we started watching old movies together, stuff that I'd loved them to see that I'd never got round to, that I wanted to show them I mean stuff like Back to the Future, classics from the 80s. For them, like history, for me is like yesterday, but also stuff from like the 60s and 50s. And we also, they're both quite arty, they enjoy their arts and crafts stuff. And we had like painting days together where we'd all sit and just paint, and we made films together. They'd help me write them, and then we'd work out costumes and build sets, and we made little movies and stuff. And so in actual fact, for us, it was a weirdly positive experience, because I think we kind of needed each other, I guess, at that time, and we had each other, and it gave us a chance.
It was as though you really got into the groove of being three. It was like you really kind of understood what that was.
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think that's the thing. And there wasn't the need for me to find babysitters because I had to go out and do a thing I needed to do and all that, because there couldn't. Yeah. So we just spent 24/7, and actually it was a delight. Which I sometimes feel quite guilty about saying, that we had a lovely lockdown, but we kind of did. And I was falling in love with cooking at the time and experimenting on them with food. And then and then Lily said, I'll cook this week. And then she did all the dinners one week, or whatever, that sort of thing. So it's kind of, so, I mean, obviously we've gone back to normality now, and, we sit there grunting at each other from different rooms. That's all gone away. But we carry with us, I think, what we learned during that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like all the demands from the outside world kind of went away. In that, I think that was the enjoyable thing at the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, gosh, it did get hard eventually. You are missing people, and I think we all did. But we were lucky we had each other. Again, I feel that I'm lucky. Again, I have a reasonably nice place where I live. We had a garden. We were lucky to be able to get out there. I'm not under any kind of illusions that I was living a very kind of middle-class privileged existence where I could do that, and I could take the car out to the local farm shop to buy fresh vegetables. It was kind of like some people had it very bad, and we were lucky in a lot of respects. But I made a decision to make it positive. Let's do some projects together. Let's have some fun. Let's do stuff.
And it sounds like you really did. It sounds like you did, and you took the opportunity to kind of become even closer, which is really beautiful.
But also, like the projects we're making, the films we made were, although they were sort of fun little sort of fantasies in a way, they were about lockdown, and they were looking at the aspects of lockdown, but through kind of film pastiches, and we can look back at them now, and you see the journey of what it meant to be in lockdown, but through this kind of fantastical point of view that's almost like in our imaginations, where we become scenes from different films and characters from films and stuff. And looking back at that now, it's quite interesting, because it wasn't just making films about anything, it was making films about lockdown, and it's become a record of that for us, which has been quite interesting.
Amazing, the creativity that it sparked. But then in you guys, I'm not surprised that that's how it worked out. But I read that you felt that something of the grief, kind of came back in lockdown, and then there were some tricky moments. And I've been thinking about the way that you depict Joy, you know, especially in the early days, but when you draw her, you draw her in this really beautiful way with this use this white shading around the outside of her, and
it's a bit like the Star Wars, the Force ghosts, you know, like when they come back, like when Ben Kenobi comes back and they're sort of glowing a bit, and you know, it's that kind of sense of how she is in my head when I think about her, you know.
The way you described in the beginning, that feeling of presence. Do you think that is that how Holly and Ben experience her too? Do you talk about that?
They do think about her. I think they feel her, possibly not quite in the same way that I do, but they certainly still. She's very present in our lives. I don't think a day goes by when we don't mention her in some way. As she gets talked about. Oh, Mum would have loved this. Or can you imagine what Mum would be saying now? And that comes up all the time. So I haven't really, you know what? I haven't really talked about how they experience her. But the fact they look at the sketchbooks like they do, and they know how I do, I'm wondering if there's an element of that still with them. But they certainly carry the memory of who she was and the way that she would be experiencing what's happening now. So there's never been a denial that she's gone. It's always, Mummy would have loved this. I can imagine if she was here, what she'd be. So I kind of like the fact she's present, even though the absence is acknowledged.
Almost as though she's present in them, sort of guiding.
Which is kind of ties in with what I was talking about right at the beginning, the fact that you are everywhere. She is everywhere. And she's in us in that way. And I mean, it's that, you know, no one ever truly dies while they're still remembered, is, you know, one of these sort of sayings. And that's absolutely true, you know, I think. But they still carry her with them, I think, in their own particular way, whatever that may be. And you know, maybe they'll tell me one day. I don't know. I haven't dug. That's the thing. I try not to dig. I let it come when it comes.
Yeah. And I'm sure it will, and it does. And you know, it's always, relationships are always evolving and changing. And so long as you keep connected, you stay connected, then you know these things they come, and you just have to be there when they do. So.
Exactly.
And it's brilliant that there's a new chapter opening in your life now. You have a new partner now, Lisa, and you've recently engaged.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been quite extraordinary and unexpected.
But talking to your children about that, it must have been hard. I mean, even though you're very good, obviously, at having difficult conversations.
It was. I mean, the initial bit, I think it wasn't hard to say. It was hard to bring myself to say to them. I was kind of nervous, you know. It was kind of weird. It was like the role reversal had happened, and it was like, you know, especially saying to Lily, so you know, right, Lisa, you know, that we're seeing a lot of her, aren't we, sort of thing. You do realize that I've fallen in love with her, right? You know, and she's like, yeah, and it was kind of, they were so sort of matter of fact and casual about it, and but I was kind of nervous. It was really funny to sort of break it. And yes, I was saying, you do realize, of course, she's not replacing Mummy. She's not, you know, it's not making anything go away there. You understand that. And that's the thing I wanted to make clear to them as well. That was that although there's someone new, that doesn't mean that I'm forgetting Joy, you know, and they were very clear on that. And what's amazing is that Lisa's very good about that. She talks about Joy with them and everything as well, and she'll bring her up in the conversation and stuff, and that's quite extraordinary and wonderful. And one of the many reasons I love her so much. And it's kind of a very important aspect, I think, when you do get into another relationship, that the previous partner, you know, the is acknowledged, is because they're still part of that relationship, really. And if the new partner can accept that as well, that's an important aspect. And I have some friends who've been through it who the new partner finds it very hard to talk about the one that's lost, and you think, well, no, they're not a threat.
No, I mean,
if they weren't gone, you wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of, it's all part of the journey, and but it's been rather wonderful.
It's all part of the it's part of you and it's part of them, I suppose. And if they're
Well, who I am now is different to who I was then, and I'm not the
Yeah.
person now that I was when Joy was alive. I'm a different person because of what I've gone through, and that's the person that Lisa's fallen in love with, and the person who has fallen in love with her is a slightly different person, and it's this journey, and yeah, and the kids, I think they're aware of that, they understand that, and they're pleased, you know. So
Yeah, well, that's fantastic, and I got that sense from the illustrations, and you know, you so beautifully sort of put that in the conversation that you had with Lily, particularly. You know, there's this, I got this sense of nervousness. You know, you're sort of there on the bed, and she's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's almost this sense of that's exactly how it should be, and that's what I would want for you. You know.
yeah. Well, they were very cool right early on. They were sort of open to the concept of it very early, because I think children live in their present and whatever, and they remember saying to me right early on, I mean literally like about 3 months after, do you think you'll get married again, you know? And I was like, can I just get used to this first, sort of thing. I think they'd been watching Marrying Mum and Dad on CBeebies or whatever, and they just wanted to be
They
on
wanted
that,
to do that.
yeah. So but it was kind of it wasn't a concept that was alien to them right from the start, which is very interesting. But when it became a reality, it was still quite a thing to sort of approach and go,
Yeah.
it's happening, guys, you know.
Yeah, and it's been very organic, obviously. Yeah,
very good. And but it's
well
amazing.
Well, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. I feel really privileged, actually, to talk to someone who's so open and honest, and especially about something that's, you know, very, very painful and difficult. But you know, you're just incredible. You've had this journey, you've been on this journey, and then you've been able to share it, and as you said, you know, really, really, really help lots of people in doing that. You know, I think there's this amazing sense of empathy at the core of everything that you've done. And I just wanted to end with a question that I always end with. So, yeah, so the idea behind this tenderness revolution is this quality of tenderness. And it's a quality that we can have for ourselves and for others. And there are 3 C's that make up this concept of tenderness, because they now allow us to really fully see the truth about the way things are. And the 3 C's are courage, curiosity, and compassion. And I wanted to ask you, if you had to choose one of these qualities that really shows up the most in your life, which would it be and why?
I'd like to think possibly, gosh, they're all there, aren't they? Compassion, I think.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Compassion. I think understanding and feeling what other people are feeling, acknowledging that, accepting that, understanding that. I think that's compassion. It's another word for kindness, really. And I think kindness is the most important. I say to my children now, being kind is the most important quality you can have in life. You know, be a kind person. Don't be confrontational. Don't be unkind. Being kind is, I think, you know, you get back what you put in. If you are kind to other people, kindness generally should find you. And you know, I do think that's important. I mean, all 3 are brilliant words. I like them all, and it's a hard choice. But yeah, I'm going to go with compassion. There we go.
You know, I had a feeling that you would, because that is what I get from you. That's what I get when I look at your drawings, when I hear you speaking, and it's so it's remarkable, because it's not something that you often come across, and I think that you do exude it very naturally. But I think you seem to have this sense of common humanity, and there's this Buddhist concept, common humanity. I'm sure you're aware of it, and I think that seems to be what you do. It's like you understand that, you know, we feel pain, we feel suffering when we're lonely, and when we have this misguided sense that what we're experiencing is different from other people, that, you know, we're going through something that no one else has been through, and actually that's never true. You know, we all, it's like this circle of experiences that that, you know, that swirl around us, and we're all connected by them. And it's as though you knew that, you tapped into it, and you stepped into this journey of grief with that knowledge, and have done so much good.
Well, thank you. That's really kind. I'm sort of blushing a little bit. I mean, I just sort of follow my instincts from day one, and hope for the best. And you know, I just, I've had no plan. It's just sort of gone on. But people say nice to me like that, and it, you know, it's lovely. I'm very British and don't quite know how to take compliments. But
well, we can all learn from you. You know, that's what I love about what you do, and that you're out there, you're sharing so openly and honestly, and you know, and not from a place of, you know, the surface. You know, you're sharing from a very deep place, from a very difficult place, and that's
if we all learn to sort of open up and share more and say how we genuinely feel, there'd be a lot less problems, wouldn't there?
Yeah, I really do think so. Yeah, and I think so much of difficult behavior, so much of the problems that show up in the world, you know, the really serious problems, like things that are happening now, as well as just the day-to-day conflicts, they occur because of the stuff that we're carrying, you know, the stuff that we haven't looked at, that we haven't been willing to kind of acknowledge. And again, you know, you kind of outlined this wonderful practice. You don't have to be, you know, a talented illustrator like you to just turn your attention towards, you know, what has happened with you that day, or what you're feeling, or what you want to, like you said, give thanks for, and then just find a way of recording that in a sense.
And recording it makes you aware of it, and it makes you aware of where you are and how lucky you are when you are, and if you're not, makes you aware of that. And those are important. Self-awareness, you know, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Oh,
it's everything. Well, thank you, Gary. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been lovely to talk to you.
It's been lovely. Yeah, I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Tenderness Revolution. I hope you come back for more, because my aim with this podcast is to help us become more aware of these moments of kindness and compassion, and how they shape our lives, and enable us to feel more connected to the world around us.